Monday and Wednesday night with you guys over here on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on TikTok. Run it down in the AMA to give you guys what you're looking for, all the juicy details that we have going on out there in macroeconomics that will likely lead to some of the high price predictions that I've had in the past for XRP and many other digital assets. Got a lot of things percolating out there when it comes to things going on with Iran and oil. Obviously, you know, Venezuela was a big deal right after New Year's, and then now we're at a point where things are starting to escalate there in the Middle East. And it looks like, you know, not just me anymore in my siloed little echo chamber. I'm not the only one talking about the Strait of Hormuz potentially being shut down. We've got multiple other intelligent people coming out talking about the possibility that that shipping lane could be in a position where there's a choke point for the global oil supply. Thank you, my wonderful wife. It smells some good tea. She got me the good tea tonight. All right. So anyway, that global shipping lane is imperative to supplying many regions across the globe with their energy. And if they do not have the oil, or there is a pause in the oil flowing from that region to their docks, there would be substantial rise in price. Well, what we're watching for very closely is the price of oil to go up in yen, because that's what's going to cause the Bank of Japan to have to raise interest rates. We did see the yen weaken substantially against the US dollar, get all the way back to close to 160 per US dollar. So it's 160 yen, you know, exchangeable for $1 US. And with all that being said, you know, the Bank of Japan has tried to keep it between 140 and 160 for an extended period of time. And they've been successful in doing that. They've raised interest rates at key times in order to be able to strengthen their currency versus others. And if we get outside of that, it's going to snap back. And that is going to be, you know, I think that the Bank of Japan's probably going to look for another scapegoat and reason to raise interest rates aggressively. They've already come out and said that they are way behind other nation states and other countries globally with their interest rate. And it looks like they will potentially raise somewhere between 75 basis points and 1%, which is 100 basis points. It's a big deal. It's a lot of movement in a very short period of time, but they do need a scapegoat because they don't want to be the ones that wreck the global economy when the reverse carry trade unwinds. So I do think we're, you know, pretty close here. Again, it's all contingent on conflict escalating there and that shipping lane being shut down. Maybe there's something else with Russia that gets involved. You know, we've seen, I don't even know what to call it. Arsenal is not the right word, but many global superpowers are positioning themselves in the region to react to situations that might unfold. We've got U.S. aircraft. I don't know if the U.S. is who struck Iran earlier today. You know, I'm sure that this feels like instability and uncertainty and probably the beginning of World War III for most people. I don't want that. I don't want anybody to die. I don't want collateral damage. I'm not looking for any of that. I'm hoping that there's some type of stalemate that leads to, you know, them just, they've shut off air traffic above Iran right now. And if there is something that escalates, you know, they don't want people in the region for collateral damage or bad things to happen. So, you know, that happened probably about 5 hours ago. We saw them start shutting down commercial air flights over the region. And we've seen, you know, some other explosions and things happen since then. How does this all play out? What does it culminate to? I do believe it moves toward a black swan event that other people, you know, I'm really one of the few people talking about a spike in oil causing a cascade of events that would lead to really a global collapse in the economy, which would only be rectified by using XRP to facilitate instant settlement, settle the back end of the stock market, de-risk from all of that, and also spur economic growth because it would reduce inflation across the economy almost instantly. The majority of the latency between payments being made would, be compressed to much faster timeframes, and people could get money faster, and it would actually, kind of jumpstart the global economy. So, all that being said, that's what I think we're on the precipice of, and we've got the Clarity Act. If you guys have been living under a rock, I did state in 25, I was on Capitol Hill, got to talk to the congressmen and women when they marked up and passed the Clarity Act in the House before it moved to the Senate. They didn't feel like it would get through the Senate, and they were right. And again, I've disseminated that to people. A lot of people were very hopeful that it would get passed at the end of last year, and then we had the government shutdown, and they kicked the can. The markup that was released today, Coinbase is not happy. Brian Armstrong has spoken out adamantly against passing what they've proposed here for the Clarity Act in the Senate. And Brad Garlinghouse also spoke on the subject. He doesn't feel overly threatened by it. He seems to think it's okay. Obviously, people are going to advocate for their interests in this stuff. And Coinbase is obviously lobbied pretty substantially on Capitol Hill. They're a large contributor. Ripple and many other large fintech companies that deal in the crypto space obviously have been proponents of bipartisan regulation, but they all have their own interests when participating, right? The way that the Clarity Act is currently drafted it removes a lot of the freedoms that people have enjoyed in crypto. It also puts things in place so that people can be held accountable if there are missteps or problems in crypto. Many people want to be self-sovereign and value their privacy and hold their own keys. And I think that's great. We want to preserve that. But at the same time, we do want some oversight from regulatory bodies. I don't like the way they crafted the CFTC's role in this being moved under the SEC. I don't think that we want the SEC being the governing body across all of the tokenized assets. I think that the CFTC is in a really good position to foster innovation in the space and provide clarity around certain things. And I do think that there'll be tokenized securities, obviously. But that was another piece of this that was kind of odd. It felt like, they didn't want tokenized securities if this bill was passed. So the way that it's written, I think that they'll probably go back and forth. I think that things will get drawn out a little bit here. If they don't get anything passed by really kind of 12, around the 26th is kind of the cutoff where they're going to have to focus the majority of their time and energy on getting a funding bill passed. That's the other thing that's looming here. At the end of the month, there is another government shutdown if they don't get another funding bill passed. And if this were to linger and get stretched out, it's likely not going to become a priority. The government does shut down because they don't get something passed. We could have another 30 or 45-day shutdown. That puts us in the middle of March. You then have the midterms. And really, if they don't get it passed here in the first couple weeks of 2026, and the Democrats do take positions after the midterms, they may not even get it passed ever, which I don't like. We want a level playing field. We want the technologies to compete with one another and provide the best solutions in an open, decentralized market. I obviously have biases, and I think XRP is going to do really well irrespective because it already has clarity because of the lawsuit here in the US. And I do think it's uniquely positioned to appreciate and be used prior to the Clarity Act being passed, which I've stated multiple times. And I do think will likely happen. So we'll have to see. I would like to see things passed early here in 2026 for this, and maybe another bill introduced later in the year to kind of fill the gaps or the missteps for this one, to make sure that we are, continue to foster innovation here in the US and we become that leader like we were with the internet. But what it really boils down to is these next 12 days. So we'll see, the original markup was supposed to be tomorrow. We'll see if, they actually released that a little bit early. So that's promising that they released it. People are going to go back and forth, and hopefully they can come to something that they can pass here in the next 10 days, before their focus has to be put on the funding bill. So that's where things sit. We'll go ahead and get into the Q&A tonight. Again, appreciate you guys coming out of your schedule to come hang out with me and ask great questions. We've got a lot of good people over here on YouTube and people on TikTok asking questions as well. On the other side, again, not going to belabor this or spend a bunch of time on it. We are suing Zach Rector, and I will answer questions about that. I don't want it to be consuming or take a bunch of time here, but if people do pay and ask questions, I will answer those. All right, we've got, please clear this up. Do we need the Clarity Act or no? Depends on what you're asking about. Is it for appreciation for crypto as a whole, or the adoption of multiple networks in multiple capacities, a tokenized economy? If we want a real tokenized economy and a large amount of tokenization, again, my estimate is that 80% of the global economy will be tokenized by the end of 2030. It's only 4 years away. That's not that far. And so, understanding that we really do need clarity pretty soon here in 2026 for that to become a reality, if I'm accurate on that, which I would like to be. So for that piece, yes, we need clarity around all these different networks, because there's different networks have different benefits and different applications. There is not going to be a an end all be all solution for, everything running through just one network. There'll be interoperability between chains. I do think everything will settle back to the XRPL at the end of the day and through XRP. But Solana, I think, could take NFTs and digital titles. You got Hedera, which is great for dApps and Web3 applications. You've got Hyperledger, which is peer-to-peer payments and merchant services. You've got Hash or Provenance, which is tokenizing mortgage-backed securities on that chain and rolling those up and selling that debt off, alongside life insurance products being tokenized on that chain. I did a whole rundown of all the different networks and where they're starting to see traction in real-world applications for the tokenization of real-world assets about 8 months ago. And so if you wanted to understand which networks already have traction and what applications they're going to see progress and price appreciation for their use, that's a great video. You can go back and watch it. But if you're asking specifically about the price appreciation for XRP and the use of that token, no, I do not believe we need the Clarity Act in place. I do think that it would be followed up very shortly after with regulation. But for the price appreciation, again, and the back-end settlement of the stock market, I think we're good to go with how things sit now. All right. We got BZ. He says, thank you, legend. Appreciate you, man. I can see the oil spike potential with Iran, but I'm not seeing anything online in regards to BlackRock XRP ETF, which I believe is part of your theory. What do you know that we don't regarding BlackRock? Well, I've said this many times before. I think BlackRock is much more intimately involved with Ripple than what's publicly available for people to understand. BlackRock was tapped and pulled in, I think, by the US government to repackage the debt and punt the football and come up with a solution to be able to rebalance the debt. And tokenization of all of the economy does that. And the reason for that is you get a positive flywheel going. So if you have a bearer asset that you could draw debt against to be able to purchase assets, to move them on chain, that then added more volume and value to a network that caused the asset that you drew debt against to appreciate, you just continue to roll that, right? And over time, that asset continues to go up and up and up in value. We've already seen with Bitcoin, but nobody's tokenizing anything on the Bitcoin network. Doesn't have smart contract capability. You know, they've used runes and other things to be able to like etch things on different Bitcoin in order to have, you know, some type of NFT functionality on that chain. They've got to have, you know, Lightning Network in order for it to be able to scale, where they lock up collateral very similar to what they do with Ethereum and Matic, the layer 2 there. The XRPL is unique in that it doesn't have a ton of smart contract capability. They're continuing to add amendments to that chain. We know that it's possible to have, you know, high levels of TPS and lightweight smart contracts because we've already seen Sora-band smart contracts put on chain on Hyperledger, which was an exact replica of the XRPL, except, you know, the initial account isn't black holed, and they, you know, burned 50 billion of the initial supply, so it has half the total supply, but it has very similar characteristics to the XRPL. So when it comes to BlackRock, I do believe that they will launch an exchange traded product. We saw in November of 2023, they filed a BlackRock ETF iShares XRP Trust in Delaware. I really do believe it was BlackRock that filed that. For somebody to fake that, the people that had to sign that document and notarize it, and it just struck me oddly that that would even be possible. But they swept that under the rug, and now they have filed an A8 for their BlackRock ETF trust, which is just ambiguous. You don't know what's in it until they file their S1. And with the way that the spot crypto ETFs now have a specific structure where they're immediately, you know, approved by the SEC, they could launch that at any time, file that S1, and run. So, you know, with all of that being said, I do believe that they're going to come to market with that. I put out a tweet earlier that's kicked the hornet's nest, I guess. I think that Ripple may end up getting acquired by BlackRock. Now, that's not a certainty, but I do think that they work much closer together than most people realize, because again, if BlackRock's initiative is to stabilize the debt and repackage it and balance the debt here in the US, really the only way they're going to do that is through tokenization, and it's going to have to be pretty well siloed on one network to get the appreciation of a token to be able to back the financial system and draw debt against as a tier 1 asset, which I've talked about XRP being many times. So, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I'm just some guy on the internet, and this is probably a good time for my disclaimer. Nothing here is financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes. And so if you do need financial advice, legal advice, tax advice, I would highly recommend reaching out to an actual advisor that has the credentials and licenses in order to be able to provide you with that type of advice. If you need those type of professionals, you can always reach out to Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners for the wealth management. We have partners and people that work for the corporation that can provide you advice. I am not one of those people. And therefore, you know, my opinions are my opinions. They are not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or its subsidiary Digital Wealth Partners. So the other thing that I think could happen with Ripple is maybe they go public through a direct listing. They've said that they will not IPO, which, you know, I think is pretty, I think it's telling. If you know what a direct listing is, it's still a public offering. You list at the market. You don't have to do a roadshow with the investment banks or dilute your shareholders and issue new stock. There's also no lockup period. You would be able to immediately sell your shares onto the open market through a direct listing. We saw this with Coinbase, right? And we saw Coinbase sell off significantly when it was immediately listed. They also happened to list like the day that Bitcoin topped in 22 or 21. Yeah, 21. They've been public for almost 4 years or 4 years. Wow. Anyway, I think they went public at like around $350 a share, and they fell all the way back down to around the 40s. I don't know where they're at now. Where is Coinbase now? They are back up, I'm sure. Coinbase stock. Where are we at? We're at 255, so not quite back to the all-time high where it was originally listed at. It did get back up to actually went all the way up to 420 and has pulled down. So I will handle those, babe. So that's where Coinbase is at. But I do think that Ripple could be listed again, go public, but through a direct listing. Valuation on that's going to be wild. I think it's going to be the largest IPO or public offering that has ever happened at the market. I think that they will be. Santander was the largest before, or Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco was the largest IPO or public offering up to this point. I think they went public around 59 billion. Ripple just raised another round from Citadel and Fortress at a $40 billion valuation for $250 a share. I think that they could easily go to market at 3 to 5 times that valuation, around $750 or $100 or $1,000 a share later this year. If we see the appreciation of XRP and the adoption of a lot of their services, with the acquisitions that they made last year, G Treasury, Hidden Road, Rail, Palisade. I mean, they're really in a position. They have a unique stack. They're vertically integrated. They have a product basically. So when Hidden Road, there was a interview that we did with them earlier in 2020 or later in 2025 that we put out for the mastermind, some exclusive content for the people there. And in that, we actually learned that the full product offering that Ripple is bringing to market is called Ripple One. So that includes all of the treasury management services that they have, along with Ripple Prime, their stablecoin issuance and management, and their wallet component, which is Palisade, including their custody, also Mataco, which is now Ripple Custody. They rebranded that over the past 3 years. And they also have Standard Custody, which is their trust bank there in New York that has the BIT license. And they also have all the money transmitter licenses that they need to be able to transact globally at this point. The UK just issued their final approval for their ability to operate in that region. And as far as I'm aware, there's nothing lacking for Ripple. They do have everything in place to be able to operate globally at this point. And you could correct me if I'm wrong. If there are any regions that Ripple does not have their licenses in, that's something I would like to know. This person says, do you own Ripple stock? We do. We've put private deals together over the years, and we are on their cap table. We do share, a lot of that stuff with our private community over there for the mastermind. And again, if you want to check that out, see if it's of interest to you, you can go to beyondbroke.com and use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month. Small discount. We are doing away with social at the end of this month. And so this is the last 15 days that you will have access to the mastermind in a social membership. And if we see a $10 XRP before then, we're locking it down. It'll be invite only, and the prices will be much, much higher. So hopefully that answered your question about BlackRock. And again, appreciate the good questions and the super chat. Go ahead and jump to the next one. Jatoshi. I'm definitely not Satoshi. Oprah says, I think you're great and a visionary. I appreciate that. Iran stopped all air traffic and carrier strike group is ahead of Iran. Clarity Act doesn't look like it's going to pass. Why is BlackRock hiding in the shadows about XRP? We know that there's NDAs between BlackRock and Ripple. Both Brad Garlinghouse and Larry Fink, when asked about a BlackRock ETF or spot ETF for XRP, both of them said, I can't talk about that. So you know that there are NDAs there, and that again, that tells me all I need to know. I do have some super chats here on the desk that my wife was nice enough to print out for me for people that I missed last time. So I will jump into those before we get to the rest of these. Dee's actually reached out to me on X earlier today, and I answered this one, but I think it's something that other people would have interest in. So I will go through it again. He says, great live stream. My question is, if we get price appreciation before the Clarity Act for XRP, then we get clarity after, how long will we be able to buy XDC, XLM, DAG, etc. for cheap before they rise aggressively? And this is interesting. I don't have, and I told him this the same thing. I don't have a good answer for that one. The only one that I am absolutely positive sees significant price appreciation when all this plays out is XRP. On the other assets, I think that they're going to be a longer adoption curve, depending on what application their chain or protocol is used in, and how much value flows into that network. I do think, though, when we see the Clarity Act and we see liquidity flow into XRP, it's likely that other digital assets will see some appreciation also. How much? I don't know. I think that it will be less than XRP. And again, that's, these are all my biases. These are my opinions. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. But, I think that the appreciation on XRP will be exponentially greater before all of the other ones. Now, not to say the other ones won't appreciate also. I just think XRP outpaces them for the short term in order to be able to get to scale, to be able to meet demand for back-end settlement of the stock market and a liquidity buffer for the FX market, and other applications as well where it should be used. I think, if all this plays out with Iran and we see the oil spike, that could happen as soon as here in 2026. And again, other people have quoted me saying, $1,000 XRP this year. All of these things play out, these macro events, that's very possible. But again, that's my thesis. We've put products and solutions in place to be able to benefit from that at Digital Wealth Partners. We continue to work on products for XRP in particular. We did, and I want to address this too, Anchorage finally has listed XDC on their platform, but not for us, not on the wealth management side. Same thing with HBAR. They have the capability on the B2B side, where they do hedge fund management and all of that, not on the wealth management side. And again, like the wealth management stuff there is segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured, separated out. Anything happens to Anchorage, your assets are always safe. They're in an FBO account. You never lose ownership of them. We structure everything very meticulously and have to meet a lot of regulatory requirements and compliance to operate in the capacity that we do. So anyway, if you do have a larger amount of crypto and you want those assurances, you want some continuity planning, you want your spouse on the account, you want beneficiaries on the account so that, God forbid something happens to you, they pass to your heirs the way that you want them to or intended for. Our solution is second to none. It is the best option out there. All right. So that's what I think on those other digital assets. I will be, diversifying through borrowing against the XRP and deploying that capital back into other cryptos on the other side of price appreciation. That's my personal plan. You do your deal. I'll be using a portion of my XRP to generate returns. The other portion I'll borrow against. If I can do both against the same XRP, even better. Hopefully we get, some of these amendments for XRPL, the XRPL here this year in 2026. Pseudo accounts, borrow, lend, and liquidity pools, I think, are going to be awesome for institutional DeFi applications and benefiting from the asset itself. But again, right now we have partnerships and we've structured this in a Web 2 way that makes sense and is safe. And we've mitigated as much risk as we can. There's always going to be some risk in this market and with financial products, but we've done as much as we can to, keep things from going poorly. Next one, we got moving on up. They say, can I buy crypto with my personal Kraken account, hold on a personal cold storage until I'm ready to move it into institutional custody, then use custody address on my capital contribution page when I commit the capital or move it in? Yes. Yeah, you could absolutely continue to buy and hold it on a personally held cold wallet and then set the institutional account up there at Anchorage. And when you move that in, you could consider that your capital contribution to start the business. Again, we help people structure LLCs to be able to mitigate taxes, get creditor protection, have the anonymity for operating there in Wyoming through the attorney-client privilege that you get. And then in addition to that, we do help people structure it the right way so that there's no tax implications when you do contribute the assets to the LLC. We structure them as a single member disregarded entity. If you structure it as a partnership, you can do that in 15 states that have a qualified joint venture or a QJV. So look and see if your state is a QJV. If you do want your spouse as a 50-50 partner with you on the entity, you can do it in those states with no tax implications. If you are in a state that does not have that exemption, you would set up a single member for partner that holds the crypto or has bought it, and then you can make your spouse a manager on that LLC. And then obviously you can put things in the operating agreement where they're the ones that get it. The other thing that you can do is set it up and do the assignment to your living trust. So if you and your spouse are both on one living trust, and that's what you hold your assets in, that's great. If you had two separate living trusts, which some partners do, you might, appropriate a portion of the assets or the equity to those trusts. Again, you want to work with an attorney to do this the right way. We have multiple attorneys that we work with in order to structure this correctly. And then separate of that, we do have our paralegal service over there at Laughlin that does the corporate veil so that you maintain the creditor protection. And if you the living trust in your state and the LLC, you're going to get creditor protection and probate protection, about 80% of what you would get with an asset protection trust for much, much less. We charge $500 is all we charge for the living trust. And right now it's only $2,000 for the LLC end to end if you use the code 50OFF, 50OFFDAG LLC. All right. And then we got one more super chat before we move on to the next one here. We got Nitro. He says, Mastermind, Carbon One member. Awesome, dude. Appreciate you. He says, love your content, your refusal to cave to naysayers, and your commitment to all of this. But, always a but, why is oil not going up with all that's already happened with Venezuela, Russia, and China? We started to see people in hedge funds and larger institutions take positions. We've seen some appreciation in oil off the bottom. A lot of people, still believe that oil is going much lower. Again, I am not a chart person. That's not my game. I look at the macro and try to understand things. Timing also, candidly, not perfect at that either. I'd be okay if things do escalate here this week, and I'm off by a couple weeks. I think people would give me some grace on that. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I think people would give me some grace. But yeah, we've started to see oil priced in yen start to rise. We're about 7% over the last 7 days. In order to get the inflation up there in Japan and then have to raise rates aggressively, it's likely going to have to spike, somewhere between 20-25% or greater in a very short period of time. And that would then cause them to have to move quickly, have an emergency meeting. The Bank of Japan is going to have their meeting this month on the 23rd, and they do intend to raise interest rates then. So, but that's going to be priced into the market. Markets are always forward looking, about 6 months. They're anticipating things, which is just human nature. And so the only time that you're going to get a discrepancy between what the market is today and a different outcome would be if there's a black swan or something that is not anticipated that happens. And I do think, a spike in oil is not anticipated. Again, many people saying that oil will continue lower. And also, people do anticipate a 25 basis point hike there in Japan. And I'm sure they also anticipate the US lowering interest rates another 25 basis points. I watch the 10-year yield in Japan pretty frequently. We're at 2.11 or 2.15 right now. We saw 2.18 as the high, as the percentage there on the 10-year yield earlier today. If we get past 2.3, 2.4, that's where you're going to see people starting to rotate out of US Treasuries into Japanese bonds. And that's where things get ugly. And we're going to have to start issuing stable coins pretty quickly here in the US to be able to soak up those treasuries as they flow onto the market, which I do think that they will. I think that the bond market will be fine. They'll save the day. And they have this solution, XRP, sitting in the background, ready to go. Faithful 10 says, hey, Jake, I am not financially. I have a not financial advice question. Sorry. It's late, can't read. We'll put it in as, what would you do in this situation? Okay, cool. Give me context. They say, you own a rental property with 50K in equity. Sell to invest in XRP. Thanks for all that you do. I'm going to need more context again. So I don't know what the rest of your investments are. I don't know if you are diversified. I don't know if you have millions of dollars. I don't know if you're 30 years old or 50 years old. I don't know if you have kids. I don't know what your lifestyle needs are. I don't know what your income is from your job. There's just so many other variables that could play into, you said financial advice for you. This is not for you. So you are asking me what I would do. So context, I'm in my mid 30s. We own our home. So this rental home would be separate. Which sounds like it is for you too. 50K in equity is not that much. Selling it, you're going to have to pay taxes and a broker fee and all the stuff that goes along with that. You're probably not going to be able to get the full 50 out of it if you sold it, which is what you said here. Now, you could take a HELOC against it, but it sounds like you probably already have a mortgage on it, and you're already paying that. So I don't know if you're able to service the debt or additional debt with the rent that you have on the property if you take that equity out. Probably not if you're asking me if you're going to sell it. Again, I'm inferring a lot of stuff here, so doing the best I can with what I got. I'd probably let it ride. Like if I already made that investment, I had a renter in there. If it was going to stay occupied, if it was in a growing area. So like, again, I'm just going to apply my context. It would probably be somewhere in Dallas here if I had a rental property. I don't know where you're located geographically. But for me, this is a growing market. There's more people moving here. Rents are rising. I think that the property will appreciate over the long term. And continue to compound the equity and also spit off cash flow as long as I'm able to service the debt and get a little bit of extra on it. That's awesome. So that's for me. Now, if this is a larger home, but there's only 50K in equity and upside in it, you make a lot of your money when you buy real estate on the buy, not on the sell. So you're going to look for stuff that's distressed, that you can take over payments on, that is worth more than what the note is. Things like that, are ideal, or things that are in foreclosure. Every county in Texas, at least, auctions off properties on Tuesday, the first Tuesday of each month. In each county, they will auction off on the court steps, whatever houses are in foreclosure there. There's often a lot of good deals there, and you can do value add and add, fix properties up, and then you can get another valuation done on it. And you might have added $200,000 or $300,000 worth of equity if it was a really dog house in a good area. There was a gentleman I saw the other day that bulldozed a house. He bought it. It was the cheapest house in the neighborhood. The majority of the homes in the neighborhood were selling for $1 million. It was old and dilapidated. He got it for like 350 grand, and he's building a home on that property, refinanced it against the land to be able to build on it. And the house that he's building is brand new. It's going to cost him about 400,000. So, 350 plus 400, which he financed, and he's going to come out, about 300,000 to the good and the equity in the home when he gets it all built. So just stuff like that. Like if you can look through things and find opportunities in markets that are expanding and not contracting, people are moving there. There there's definitely opportunities in real estate. That's not my game or what I spend the majority of my time on. We do have a lot of people in our network that do that consistently. We have people that produce 42% a year, every single year for the past 6 years with one of the investment opportunities that we have. And separate of that, a lot of stuff in multifamily or commercial. We know people that have been very successful in raw land. I don't know anybody in industrial land that's been successful, but here in Texas, I can tell you there have been more warehouses and stuff built in the past 5 years than I've ever seen in my lifetime. But it's very apparent to me that a lot of manufacturing is moving here to Dallas in particular. And with the tariffs and everything else, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know how that's going to work out. We didn't talk about that. I don't know if Congress is going to ban Trump's ability to issue tariffs. We'll have to see. I think that happens tomorrow also. And crazy times, a lot of volatility and uncertainty right now. But again, for me, that's why I just continue to buy more XRP, because it's the only thing I'm personally certain on. Nick says, Jake, can you explain why the reverse carry trade unwinds XRP price will shoot up, or if it happens while with others as well? Thanks, knowledgeable. Thanks for your knowledgeable kindness. Appreciate you. Cheers. So supply and demand shock. I believe that it'll be coordinated, where we've already seen this. We've already seen a lot of the XRP supply taken off of the OTC desk and dark pools and even the exchanges also. And so that doesn't leave a whole lot available. As we do see more demand for XRP, if Japan starts using XRP to facilitate settlement of the FX market, that's a ton of demand there. Tether goes illiquid because it's depegged. There's demand for the exchanges to use XRP in that position. Back-end settlement of the stock market by Project Ion to be able to de-risk from stocks as the reverse carry trade unwinds, and the Bitcoin ETF losses that people will see. There's just so many different pieces of the economy that will require XRP in a very short period of time and drive demand for it, all while the OTC desk and dark pools go empty and people have to go to exchanges in order to be able to source this. And once the volume hits the exchanges at scale and there's not that much left, the chart will gap up. We already saw this on Upbit earlier today. We've seen it on Kraken. There's not a whole lot in between where we're at now and 90 or $100, which is wild. But I do think that that's the type of move that you're going to see in a very short period of time when oil spikes and the reverse carry trade unwinds. I think that they will rotate liquidity into XRP through the ETFs. BlackRock will, step in at the opportune time and push it to the levels it needs to be able to be used to restart the economy and de-risk the unrealized losses that many of the investment banks are going to have. And that's the other piece. If it's on balance sheets and held by institutions, which we know Ripple has over 1,700 NDAs, let's say that they have option to buy it at 0.0003 of a penny, they'd be able to execute that very easily. Ripple already paid the $50 million in fines for those early security sales that did violate the securities laws. And alongside that, they got clarity for XRP that it is not a security here in the US. So if they execute those contracts and the XRP is, it'd be like buying $1,000 XRP for 0.0003 of a penny. You think you could offset some debt with that? I do. I think they could offset a lot of debt with that. Even Big Daddy Trump's talked about, offsetting the U.S. debt, $38 trillion using crypto. And I think XRP is going to play a very pivotal role in all of that. Fly Girl, she says, with all the delays in the Clarity Act and Coinbase CEO pulling support, how did that affect XRP price appreciation, both positive and negative? Again, I don't think that we need the Clarity Act in order to be able to see XRP appreciation or adoption, as it is one of 3 things here in the U.S. that is designated, in my opinion, a commodity by listing on it on Bitnomial and having a USD trading pair Bitcoin, ETH, and XRP all qualify as commodities, being governed by the CFTC at this point. And so, with that, Bitcoin and ETH also have large amounts of liquidity. Settlement time, cost to use them becomes way too high at scale if you're pushing volume through those networks. So really the only opportunity or only option in a crisis at this point for what asset to be used would be XRP. So for me, it's bullish. The longer they push the Clarity Act out, the more opportunity XRP has to appreciate before everything else does. And that's also, I think it has a moat right now. We got Average Golfers Idaho. Average Golfers Idaho. Thank you for the super chat. They say, Jake, with banks pushing hard to stop any yields on stablecoins, do you think Ripple, becoming a bank, can work in their favor to offer yields on RLUSD or XRP? Lastly, I sent you a back nine golf message, Ball. Hope you received it. I have not received that yet, but I will be on the lookout for it. I really do appreciate that. I'm working on my long drive this year, and I bought what's the driver I bought? It's a G400. It's a Titleist driver. Average drive with that's about 350, 360. So I need to work on my weight transfer, and I think I can get my swing speed up to like 140. And if I can get my ball speed over 200 consistently, I think I'll be able to put it out there about 400 at sea level. Anyway, off of the golf subject, tangent, because I'm excited about that. When it comes back to the Clarity Act and the stablecoin yield, tokenized deposits are the solution to that, in my opinion. Many banks have already started to adopt tokenized deposits, and you can pay interest on those. They're still effectively the same thing as a stablecoin. They're just tokenized dollars that have been deposited in a bank instead of a stablecoin issued by the bank. The reason that the banks are scared of competition is Google, Meta, Amazon, people that have huge global user bases could become effectively sovereign nations or nation states with their own stablecoin that their consumer base used or held for whatever purpose. And if they could incentivize them to hold that to be able to generate a yield, they're going to be able to get way more adoption for that because they have applications that are usable, like a Google Wallet or an Apple Wallet on your phone. People use those all the time already. And so if they had a way that you could hold deposits there and generate returns like a money market just by holding your money or getting paid in that stable coin, I think a large portion of the population would do that, and banks would lose a ton of business. So they're scared for that. I do think that they will probably help the incumbent banks. I don't think that you're going to be able to earn a yield on RLUSD without deploying it into a money market. VanEck has a tokenized money market that you can invest your RLUSD into, and it pays 6%. And you can loop it, so you get a tokenized representation of that money market value that you can then borrow against and get more RLUSD or USDC. Put back in the money market, you get another representation, and around you go until you get 9% after you loop it 4 times. Not my favorite game to play. If something goes poorly with their money market and it loses money, you're going to be in a bad spot. I don't think that's going to be the case. They've been pretty risk adverse with how they've structured that and done a good job. We've talked to their team about it. It's something that we will likely offer at Digital Wealth Partners at some point here in 2026. Through Anchorage, which is our custodial partner. But all that being said, I think that they're going to incentivize people to put the stable coins into products and provide liquidity in other ecosystems to be able to generate a return versus just paying out the returns to the end consumer for holding them, which makes sense to me. You would want to put that liquidity somewhere where you're generating economic value versus just sitting it in a checking account getting paid on it. Now, tokenized deposits, like I said, I do think will be the loophole there. We've already seen some banks start to take advantage of that. We've got Miguel, 1995-ish. Big Brother Jake, what's going on? He says, what's your opinion on World Liberty Financial coin. Greetings and blessings to you and the tea lady. Thank you. Appreciate that, man. I think it'll be around similar to like Trump coin. I've said this before, but I had the opportunity to talk to Eric Trump a little bit at SALT. Not a lot. He was at the bar for the after party in the VIP area. And I'm sure I'll see him again this year at probably Bitcoin Vegas, and then also maybe SALT there in Jackson Hole, and maybe another conference too. Anyway, they obviously have significant interest in that and Bitcoin mining with American Bitcoin, but they also like XRP a lot. So I'm not overly concerned as it being a competitor to XRP. I think that it could do well too, but it's not something that I am invested in. We got killing the Irish. What's up? He says, Jake, my dude. Well, he says, Jack, my dude. I'll I know what you mean. I know it's Jake. DWP customer here. Read the lawsuit. Good for you protecting your family and your business and us. And remember, Jesus was no hippie. Jesus is a warrior. I talk to him frequently, and I wouldn't have made the decision that I did if I hadn't prayed on it. So thank you for the kind words in the super chat and the support. And again, legal process in place there, but I do think it'll work out in our favor. Again, wouldn't have filed it if we weren't confident. Maddie Love, he says, Jake, appreciate you. I'm interested in working with your team. My focus is anonymity as it relates to safety, post-price appreciation, and yield on my assets. Should I be speaking with Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners? What's the difference in cost of those? Good questions. We're actually having discussions around maybe unifying the brand, because this does get consumed, like a little bit confusing for people. So we're a multifamily office at Digital Ascension Group. Digitalfamilyoffice.io is the website for that. So if you need CPAs, you need tax planning, you need tax attorneys, you need estate planning, you need bill pay, concierge service, accounting, anything that you would expect for private client services, really kind of aside from the wealth management, we do there at Digital Ascension Group or digitalfamilyoffice.io. The wealth management component, which is what you talked about, yield on your assets or return on your assets, would be facilitated through Digital Wealth Partners, which is a subsidiary of Digital Ascension Group. And we do that for a reason, to be able to limit the liability and also operate as an SEC registered RIA that just does wealth management for crypto. They do traditional assets also in a very limited capacity, but if you wanted your total portfolio under one roof, we can accommodate that very easily. Retirement accounts, traditional accounts, and your crypto accounts all in one spot. We also have an insurance company that's called Azure Legacy. A lot of what we've done up to this point there is PPLI, private placement life insurance, alongside a lot of term policies for people that are waiting for price appreciation. We've done a lot of convertible term policies there. If you are married, if you got kiddos, I would encourage you to do that, especially to be able to lock in your health rating now, so that you don't have to worry about, God forbid something happens, you get cancer next year. The insurance companies won't underwrite you. But if you've done the health panel now and you have that term policy in place that's convertible, you're good to go. They'll be able to use that health panel even if you have a condition that shows up later. And again, don't wish that on anybody. God forbid that happens, but you never know what life's going to throw at you. So anyway, circling back, those are kind of the differences between the companies that we have and what each one does. And you would reach out to them individually, or you can go to really any one of the websites, whether it's Digital Family Office, Digital Wealth Partners, so digitalfamilyoffice.io, digitalwealthpartners.net, or azurelegacy.com. I know they all have different endings. Any one of those, when you go to the website, it's going to ask you what you're here for. And if you are here for something else that one of our subsidiaries or sister companies provides, it will push you over to that page, because it does get confusing for people. And the reason that we've, again, structured things the way that we have is to limit liability and silo risk. It's not like, it's not like FTX where there's shell companies and we, move clients' funds here or there. None of that happens. Digital Wealth Partners is the only wealth management piece. We do have Digital Wealth Partners Management, which is over the hedge fund. And that is a separate entity that manages the hedge fund. Anthony or Tony is our fund admin there that runs that deal with Max Kahn and the other advisors that are making allocations for our clients, or helping them make allocations into the fund based on their goals and objectives. We are going through the audit with them for that right now, and that'll be publicly available on the funds for the funds that we can share that on. Two of our funds there are 506C, and I can talk about those publicly. There are some other opportunities or products that Digital Wealth Partners has that they can tell you about. Because of regulations, I cannot talk about them. So if you want to learn more about any of that stuff, if any of that interests you, hopefully that gives you an idea of who to reach out to and which websites are for what. And again, when it comes to cost, structuring an LLC, $2,000, $2,500 if you want to set up the trust alongside that. I think we're going to package that at 28 total if you want the assignment alongside that. So you do need to assign the interest in your LLC to your living trust to effectuate it and make sure that you have that probate protection and the creditor protection on your digital assets. And you're going to be able to garner all those benefits through that package. And then separate of that, the wealth management piece is $1,000 to onboard with Anchorage and set your account up there. We really don't make a ton on that. A lot of that's KYC and our partners, and make a little bit of money there, but not much. And then after that, we do have AUM fees at Digital Wealth Partners. All that's disclosed in the agreement. Make sure that you're asking all the questions. You do your due diligence, pass it to your attorney to review the documents before, you sign on the dotted line. I think a lot of people get excited, and I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but I'm just going to be real with y'all. Go get attorneys to review this stuff. Go get outside counsel. Go seek other advisors to make sure everything that you're doing with us is legit. We want to operate at a very high standard, and candid feedback from other people is how we continue to improve on our own processes. And a lot of people are very trusting, which we appreciate. We try to cultivate that and, continue to show up and deliver on our promises in order to be able to build that in the public eye. But, we understand that people are skeptical also, and you should be doing due diligence and making sure that this is the right move for you and your family. So always want to be transparent, share whatever we can with people, whatever questions you have in the onboarding process. Our team over there at Digital Wealth Partners or at Digital Ascension Group, we're happy to share those materials with you guys. All right, on to the next one. We got, I'm going to butcher that if I try to say it. Thank you for the super chat. They say, hola, hola. What's, oh man, the guy that's on Sin City Crypto. Those guys, shout out to those guys, by the way. They've had me on a couple different times when we're in Vegas. We'll try to get back on their show this year. They're always awesome. So if you don't watch Sin City Crypto, they have a lot of really good updates. I would highly recommend their channel. I think they're on YouTube as well. They have a podcast. I would go check it out. Okay. So they say, I have heard you say that price appreciation will happen prior to the Clarity Act being passed. What will XRP price be? Maybe I misunderstood the statement. If so, course correct me, please. No, that's exactly what I've said. I do believe that XRP will appreciate prior to the Clarity Act. I think it'll, look like it's been repriced. So now we have two separate exchanges, both Kraken and Upbit, where XRP has jumped in a very short period of time from a few dollars all the way up to somewhere between $90 and $100. That seems like a very reasonable move when there is a supply shock on XRP. We're already starting to see it on a few exchanges, and they are registering. It's not like these are, glitches or some of the stuff that people have called this stuff in the past. Like if you look on the 24-hour on Upbid, it's $100 XRP. So all that being said, I think that that's probably the range before the Clarity Act that we get, and then maybe post Clarity Act, you could see 4 digits with it being adopted in certain capacities. So again, you know, I do have a crystal ball. I don't have a way to plug it in and turn it on and make sure that it works. These are my best guesses. And again, I'm just some guy on the internet. Take it with a grain of salt. I obviously have biases toward my portfolio and stuff that we do and products that we're creating. But all that being said, none of what we're doing would even be possible if we didn't have awesome people like you guys to work with that wanted the services and products that we're creating. So again, kudos to you guys. We have a lot of really cool people out there that want to, you know, work with Digital Wealth Partners and Digital Ascension Group and are part of the mastermind. We had our dinner just last night here in Dallas. We had about 10 people attend that dinner. Some current clients and some new prospective clients. I kind of like it that way because prospective clients can talk to the current clients and see how long they've been with us, you know, kind of suss stuff out and make sure it's okay. And obviously, you know, we like to meet our current clients. I prefer to do business where I can shake your hand, look you in the eye. You know, if something bad happens, you can find me and come punch me in the mouth. Like that's how I like to do business. That's how I do business with my advisors. I tried to find people that were, you know, I flew and met them, talked to them, structured things. So when people ask us to do that, I completely understand why you would want to. We operate a lot on Zoom. You know, we have a lot of employees all over the US. We actually have a meeting for all of our employees tomorrow. And the total list was like 75. And that includes, you know, some of our contractors and other people, which is wild. Just to see how much, you know, infrastructure we've built and how many good people we've hired to be able to execute on the vision and help our clients and, you know, again, you know, maintain the level of service and compliance that we're required to do. Just super blessed to have so many good people at our company and employees and people that want to work with us, clients, and you guys. Again, I feel super humbled coming on here and talking to y'all. So thank you. It means, and I get a lot of nice messages from people. It means way more than you know. So thank y'all. Brooks, he says, "Hey, legend, what's up, my dude? Not asking from a place of doubt, rather a place of curiosity and wanting to understand. I often draw conclusions based on consensus of trusted and respective sources. I do the same. Why are your predictions an outlier? God bless." I think I come at this from a unique perspective. Again, I watch a lot of people that I hold in a high regard, very similar to yourself, to be able to make up my mind or think critically through what's going to happen. The other piece I would say is I've had conversations, and I do have some NDAs with people that other people do not, and I can't give you specifics around what exactly has been stated in those conversations. But I can translate that and give you the outcome that I think it's going to be, right? And again, I've talked about this before. Nobody has ever explicitly told me any of the stuff I share with you guys. A lot of it has been discerned through, I've been in sales almost my entire adult life. I mean, I can walk you guys through the whole deal. So I worked at the mall at Aeropostale when I was 18, 19 years old. And sold retail. And I also stood outside the store, you know, shirtless. That was fun. And then I worked at the bank and was a teller. Also sold credit cards, and I was their highest grossing person for all of those specials and stuff that they ran there. And I don't say this to brag. I'm just trying to give you context and background. So, and then I worked in industrial sales for a decade. Painted curbs while I was in college, knocked doors doing that. Just a lot of stuff where you get a feel for how people are reacting to how you're talking. And when you're doing that, sometimes if you're really good, you can ask questions in order to elicit response, and you don't even need any words from the other person. I'm sure you might do this with your spouse, right? If you are married, you might poke around the bush and see if this is a good time to bring up something that might be controversial, or like you're going to see if they are in the mood for a fight or not. I've done that lots of times in these conversations with these counterparties, where I'll make a direct statement about XRP's price, or where I think it's going to be, or what it's going to do or be used for. And it's in context of the conversation. I don't try to make it weird. I never ask specifically. That's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to do business with these people, and create products and solutions. So, it's not there. I'm not there to like just discover information. It's just been a side benefit or tangential benefit for a lot of the conversations, to be able to discern some of the stuff that I have. And again, I come back here and I try to share it with you guys in a digestible way. So with all that being said, I think a lot of people have also been burnt. Many other people they just tell you it's going to be this price, and they don't have any context or a way for it to get there. They don't understand supply and demand economics. They don't understand geopolitical events. They don't understand, how market cap works, and what it's going to look like for protocols versus companies. I went to school for finance. It's funny you say outlier. If you've read there's a book called Outliers that I would encourage everybody that's watching this to read. It's written by Malcolm Gladwell. I feel like a person in that book a lot of the time. And I'm cool with that. Like, that is a goal of mine, to, be very wealthy and successful and do very well and help a lot of other people. And to do that, you have to bet against the consensus and be right. And I feel like that's effectively what I'm doing. Very similar to like Michael Burry in 2008. I come on here and I talk about things that are unpopular. I think gold's going back to 2000 or 2100. Nobody else is telling you that. I think silver's going to top out around $100. Everybody else thinks it's going much higher than that. And they would be right. If gold continues higher, for the gold to silver ratio to be able to revert to the mean, which is 40 to 1, and really, biblically it's 14 to 1, silver would have to be way, way higher if gold is at $4,600. But if gold retraces to 2000 or 2100 and silver continues to expand to around $100, that's 20 to 1. That's actually above the mean on the gold to silver ratio. I think gold is going to collapse hard. I do think it'll be pegged to oil on the other side, and they'll revalue some stuff. And they may reprice gold after the collapse, and they pull all the derivatives and paper out. But again, this is just my thesis, right? There's been things that I've been wrong about. I was obviously wrong about where price was at the end of last year. I thought it would be $100. I was very confident in that all the way up to the hour before. All that being said, I have been wrong about a few things on timing for stuff. I did have a complete flub to call for Bitcoin. Bitcoin went way higher than I thought it was going to. I thought, 75,000 was going to be the top for this cycle. And it obviously has, gone on to 124, 125. I do think it's probably peaked at this point for this cycle. I would love to be wrong. I would love for there to be another expansion here in all of crypto. If we saw the Clarity Act passed, I think that you're going to get that. I think you would see, a lot of liquidity move in, because then there's certainty around what these are and how they're used and how they're taxed. If we see Trump say no capital gains tax on crypto, you're going to see huge inflows into crypto. But if we do see, things persist as the status quo, or the reverse carry trade unwind, or some of the other macro events that I think are going to play out, it makes a lot of sense to me that Bitcoin would fall pretty substantially alongside gold. And that would destabilize Tether, which then causes problems for the exchanges and a greater adoption curve or demand for XRP, which again, I have a lot of biases that I want to happen, right? So I orchestrate things in a way that would benefit the outcome that I'm looking for. So again, just take all of it with a grain of salt. I'm just one person. Listen to a bunch of people before you come up with your thesis and how you make your investments. And go talk to a financial advisor. Rick, Mr. Johnson, he says, Jake, the stud with 2 Ds, 2 big Ds. Thanks for being around the movers and shakers so we can absorb so much and pass it down to us. I appreciate that, man. We travel a lot, more than my wife would like me to, and really more than I would like to a lot of the time. But I try to put myself in the rooms with the right people to get the right information, to be able to keep you guys informed and also make the best decisions for us and our clients. You know, and establishing those relationships and having those conversations and being in the right rooms has not been cheap. You know, I've paid more than I was comfortable with to be in the right rooms lots of times. I'll tell you one. So, in 2023, August of 23, we sponsored XDC on XDC, which Trey put on, which was awesome. He was part of the XDC Foundation. At the time, I think we paid 15 grand to sponsor that deal. I got a speaking slot and some other stuff, which was great, by the way. He did a really good job putting it on. It just didn't get the traction or as many people there as he was hoping for. But the benefit of that was Uphold also sponsored. And I got to hang out in the VIP party after the event and talk to Simon for like 3 hours over whiskey. I'd never met him other than that, right? In what other circumstance or world am I going to be in the same room as him? Ritesh at XDC. We flew to Dubai and I was on the USA UAE Alliance. We presented to the regulators in Dubai and had a bunch of the exchanges, including Binance and OKX there, on the topic of wealth management and what that looks like for crypto and the regulations in the US and where we thought that was going. And him and Atul were great. They helped us put that on at their office there. And then, years later, I speak with him on a panel at NYC. It was New York. It wasn't NFT NYC. There's like an open mic or Crypto Mondays. Sorry, it was Crypto Mondays in New York. And we've been able to cultivate a relationship with the foundation and Ken Chapman. There's just been so many people that have been nice enough to make introductions because they think what we're doing is cool and they want to help it. And so, again, there's a lot of time I've paid more money than I've been comfortable with to sponsor things, to be in the rooms and have conversations with the right people to continue to progress, all the stuff that we want to do for our clients. If I'm not talking to the regulators, I'm not talking to the custodians, we're not talking to the exchanges and OTC desk, we're not talking to, people that are liquidity providers or people that are building unique products. We did the depository receipt or the DR against XRP where it has a QSIP number. We can issue that against the XRP held at Anchorage, lock it, and reflect that with a Fidelity or a Schwab. And then it's, like you were holding a foreign stock, but you have it in your stock portfolio. All these things, if I wasn't in the right place, in the right room at the right time and met the right person, none of it exists. And it's just been like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. I feel like my life has been Lemony Snicket's A Series of Fortunate Events. Like if I had just made one small different change, we wouldn't be here. And again, that's why I pray a lot and I try to listen and make sure that I'm walking down the right path because doors open when you're in alignment. So if you listen to nothing else tonight, that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned over the past 5 years. If you can pray and listen and then try to be in alignment with what you hear, it opens a lot of doors for you. There are things that will happen in your life that you might have dreamed of, but they are even grander than you even believed were possible. I am not going to get to all the super chats tonight. We're already an hour and 15 in. So again, we've got a lot of people that have sent these in to the other social media platforms. Highly recommend you do that if I miss your super chat, or you can go into the mastermind again, beyondbroke.com. The moderators there will answer the super chats and the questions the same way pretty much I would. But if you do want me, you can also message me there, or again, message us on other social media platforms, and my wife will be nice enough to print them out and bring me my tea, and we will run them down here Monday and Wednesday nights. David, he says, hey, Jake, how should we handle stocks for the upcoming reverse carry trade? Should we reduce exposure in the 401k? I heard you say it takes 10 years to get back from today's PE ratios. I've already have a bag of XRP, not financial advice. So I don't know where you invested at. The statistic that I was pointing to is if you are investing at the current PE ratios of 23, 24, 25, which are very high PE ratios. If you invest right now, it takes you 10 years. Over the next 10 years, you will lose an average of 2%. It's not very good, right? Now, you probably bought in 2000 or 2001, or you've continued to dollar cost average the whole time up in your 401k, and maybe you get a match from your company. That's great. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not your financial advisor. I would go talk to your financial advisor and talk about the reverse carry trade with them or your company and say, hey, I don't know what you guys' like least risky portfolio is, but I'm feeling like, the stock market's a bit overvalued. And so if I'm higher up on the risk curve in the portfolios that you have me allocated to, I'd like to reduce my exposure to whatever the least risky portfolio you have is. And then they will move you to more of a bonds and mutual funds type portfolio, which still has a little risk to it. The mutual funds will obviously be holding stocks and other securities, but they're going to be much more diversified. And the bonds should perform well when all this happens. Michael Gayad, another great count over there on Twitter. If you don't follow him, I would highly recommend. He talks about the reverse carry trade and oil and XRP and all the cool stuff that I talk about too. Him and I get along great. He has believed that treasuries are going to be the big winner for a long time, and his hedge fund is actually built on an algorithm where that's the outcome that he sees happening. So if you are, you do have a significant exposure in your 401k to traditional stocks, I would have the conversation with whoever is managing that. And if you want to de-risk, I think based on where things are at, it makes a lot of sense historically. All right, scrolling on down. We've got Jay. He says, late to the XRP party, short on powder. Any creative avenues to obtain more XRP via lending agencies other than selling a kidney? Thanks, boss. That's not really my game. I've seen a lot of people do, hard money loans against assets to be able to get liquidity quickly. It tends to be pretty expensive if you're going to do it that way. A lot of people have done HELOCs. And again, I'm not recommending any of these things, by the way. I'm just telling you what I've seen other people do. This is in no way an endorsement to do any of this, take leverage to buy XRP. I've just seen other people do this. And so he asked me, what are some of the ways? And I'm going to explain those. I would probably not do it. I'll just say that. I've seen people take out personal loans. I've seen people lever up their XRP, borrow against that. We have avenues to do that in the mastermind and through DWP. I've seen people borrow against other digital assets or their stock portfolio. I've seen people liquidate their 401k. I've seen people or their IRA. But you can hold XRP inside of a 401k and an IRA now. Trying to think other creative solutions. I've seen other people rack up credit card debt. Again, not a favorable one. High interest rates, unless Big Daddy Trump gets his way and it's 10% for the next year, which would be great. If you can build business credit over a 6 or 8 month period and get trade lines on your business and get larger trade lines, you're going to want revenue coming through that LLC or whatever company you have, though, in order to be able to prove that you can pay that down. I don't know what you have at your disposal, so I'm just running through a bunch of stuff here. You can donate plasma. You mentioned donating a kidney. Plasma's good. You can also, you sound like Jay, you sound like a man. You could probably, be a sperm donor. I know that's probably controversial, but if you're on hard times and you're looking for some cash, I've seen people do it. Again, not things I've done. I'm just sharing things that I've seen other people do. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen people get personal loans for large amounts of money from people that they know. Again, not advocating for any of that stuff. Don't put yourself in a position where you're over leveraged and you can file bankruptcy, or you're going to miss your bills or your rent. Those are never good positions to put yourself in order to be able to lever up to buy something. There's going to be a lot of upside. Okay, so whatever allocation you have, you're early. You're before the crowd. You're before the institutional adoption of all of these protocols, and XRP in particular. So if you already have an allocation, you are very rare globally. I mean, there's 7.5 million wallets globally for XRP. That's it. And about 5 million of those are less than 500 XRP. To be in the top 10% or top 750,000 wallets, you need more than 2,500 XRP. If you got more than 10,000 XRP, there's probably only, I don't know, 3 to 400,000 people on the planet that have more than 10,000 XRP, which is wild. Is that not wild? So if you're here and you have any amount, like my barber, I'll give you an example. My barber's awesome. He threw $500 at it when it was 30 cents. So he's got like 1,500 XRP. And that's going to be good enough for him. He's in his early 40s. Let's say he continues to cut hair for another, call it 5 to 8 years. If he just sits on that XRP, that's his retirement plan. Like, he's going to be just fine if he's got 1,500 XRP in 5 to 8 years. Like, be able to retire in his mid to late 40s. Well, I said he's already in his mid 40s. So be able to retire in his very early 50s, which is great. Like, most people, if they do retire, they retire, 60 to 65. And a lot of people don't even get to retire at that point. They're working till they die. My dad worked till the day he died. I would prefer to not have to do that. I don't think I'll ever stop working. I enjoy what I do. I get a lot of fulfillment from this. And I plan on doing it for the rest of my life, which is cool. To find something in your 30s that you plan on doing for forever. But aside from that, all that said, you don't need a huge allocation to be in a very good position to be able to set yourself up, in my personal opinion. Again, none of this is financial advice. Go talk with a financial advisor. Somebody at Digital Wealth Partners would probably tell you the same thing as me, but they're going to be a bit more, they're going to hedge a little bit. If you have an extended time frame, they're probably going to agree with me. But on the shorter time frame, I think that's where I differ with a lot of our advisors. They are going to be much more of a fiduciary and tell you to diversify and look at ways to hedge and mitigate risk, and make sure that you're mitigating the worst case scenario on a lot of this stuff and still being able to meet your long-term goals. This person says, my parents are working at 72. That's what I'm saying, man. Like, I don't know. I feel bad for a lot of people that, only 10% of the population owns stocks here in the US. But 1 in 3 people own crypto. Is that not wild? Like, 30% of the population owns crypto. Only 1 in 10 people own stocks. It may be more than that on the stock market now. That was a statistic from 2023. So we've got, it's been almost 3 years since then. So it may be more than that owns stocks now. I mean, stocks are at an all-time high. Like the gentleman pointed out earlier, like, not something that I'm going to be touching anytime soon. I waited for the pullback in 2020, and I made a good amount of money in stocks in a very short period of time. That's what I'm looking to do this time too. I think that XRP is going to appreciate. I'll be able to draw down, debt against it. and deploy that into the stock market and other undervalued assets when we do see the reverse carry trade online. That's my plan. Again, just one guy. Not saying that's right for you. All right, rambling on. Thank you guys for your patience. Oh, we got Divine Purpose. They say, hey, Jake, Carbon One member, thank you for changing my life. Thank you, man. That is a wild compliment. Thank you so much. He says, as a Gold Star wife and she says, excuse me, she says, as a Gold Star wife and USAF vet, raising my daughter, you raised my bar in stewardship, mindset, and vision. Ready for what's next. God bless. Jesus is King. Jesus is King. And God bless. God bless you and your family. Thank you so much. That's incredible. You know, I wish all that, like, I didn't learn any of this stuff in school. I went to school for finance. There were 3 classes. I had one trading class my senior year that talked about options and spreads that I got a lot of money from, or not a lot of money, but a lot of information from. Business law, and then I said marketing a little bit, and accounting. Those are probably the 4 courses that I actually got something from that I use today in our business. So, you know, I wish that this stuff was more readily available, and that's why I get on here and talk about a lot of it, because it's not out there. And I think people do want to understand how money works, how to position themselves and their family, understand why you would invest in certain asset classes, whether that's private equity or real estate, or traditional stocks or bonds or treasuries or commodities or crypto. And again, I want to point this out. Thank you for your husband's service, and I'm sorry to hear about your loss. And I know that your daughter is very proud of you, and I'm sure that your husband is too. So thank you for the kind words. And again, I'll continue to come on here as long as you guys will have me and ramble on about stuff. Like I said, get a lot of fulfillment from this, and I appreciate everybody's support. Rick, again, he says, Dr. Muscles. I'm not as big as I used to be, Rick, but I appreciate the compliment. He says, on another note, association is powerful. There are certain circles out there filled with jerks. I'm sure, he says, babies like Mr. Rectum frequently participate with such circles. You know, again, like I'm not here to talk bad about anybody else. I'm not going to run anybody else down. I wish Zach the best at the end of the day, but we do have to protect our brand and reputation. And when somebody comes out and makes false statements about us frauding people or lying to the public that are just not true, we have to defend ourselves. So again, I'm not going to talk poorly about him or his business or anything that he does. We were cool until whatever happened. Not sure what actually transpired for him to feel the way he did. He knew about the lawsuit in early 2024 and distanced himself from us then. And then we kind of rekindled the relationship, and you know, the rest is kind of played out here. And yes, we are suing him. If you want all the facts around that, you would go read the court documents. It is a public suit that's filed there in Washington. All right. We've got KK Pond, my dude. He says, Jake. Actually, he says, Jake. Likelihood of BlackRock acquiring Ripple based on your X post. I guess you're asking for like a percentage. I think it really just depends. BlackRock's really the only institution that I think could acquire Ripple, or Ripple would even entertain being acquired by. I think that they will be the Amazon of crypto and payments and infrastructure. BlackRock has a lot of competing, well, not competing services, but some of the same services for TradFi. And their go-to-market strategy is a bit different than Ripple's. I think Ripple, being a subsidiary of BlackRock, staying with its own brand, is a possibility over the long term. If they allow Ripple to get too large, it would be difficult to make an acquisition. If they did buy Ripple at this point, it would be, I don't think it would be well, maybe they might do a SPAC. I don't think they would want to rebrand BlackRock though. They would probably keep it a separate subsidiary. But you probably would get, if you do own Ripple stock, would get an exchange of Ripple stock for BlackRock shares. Again, I'm 50-50. I'm 50-50 that BlackRock makes the acquisition, and I'm the other 50%, well, is probably split between them going public at some point through a direct listing or just remaining private in perpetuity. And, if you do have shares in Ripple, it's the most liquid public traded stock out there. So if you've got, 6 figures that you want to put in Ripple shares, there's a lot of brokers that will find you and source you shares out on the market. Last trades I've seen, if you want to go to notice.co, you can look at all the private equity trades that are out there. They take trades across all of the brokers and then chart private equity, which is really unique. We share a lot of this stuff in the mastermind, right? Like little nuggets like this, conversations that we've had, different tools that you can use, that I normally don't talk about here publicly, but this one's interesting. So I'll mention it because we're talking about the private equity for Ripple. Notice.co, spelled just like it would sound. And then you can go see, all of the pricing for these private companies that are actually being charted and traded. There's not anywhere else that you can really go see that publicly, which I think is cool. And guys in the Caymans, and do we have an NDA with him? I don't remember. So I don't want to say anything that would get me in trouble. He shared some information about his backers and who he works with and why he aggregates that information. I was very impressed. Anyway, so I'm 50% they get acquired by BlackRock. I'm 25% that they go public through a direct listing, and I'm 25% that they just stay private in perpetuity. Bren says, I know legal said no price prediction. However, my birthday is in June. How happy will I be on a scale of 1 to 4,000? On a scale of 1 to 4,000, I think by June you would probably be around like 2,000 or 2,500 happy, if that's the scale. So if 50% is twice as happy as you are now, I think that you'd be a little more than twice as happy as you are now about XRP's price. So however you want to take that, I like your question. At least it was worded in a way that I can keep the lawyers happy. MAGA, they say, Jake, my best regards to you and the legendary Tea Lady. I thought I was the legend, and now she's the legendary. I see how it is. I'm just giving you a hard time. Please explain why you monitor WTI priced in yen versus Brent crude in yen, when Brent crude has a much larger direct impact on the Japanese versus WTI, which is mainly used in the US. Beyond Work Mastermind, Carbon One rocks. Awesome, dude, or lady. It's just this chart that's easiest for me to access. You just want oil against yen. It could be Brent crude, it could be WTI crude. I don't think it really matters. Whatever is easiest for you to pull up. That's just the chart that I have bookmarked. The other one may be better for like looking at it, but I think they're both going to be affected pretty significantly when the move happens. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, Brent went up, 30% and WTI crude didn't. You know what I mean? So I think it's just a proxy, and you could use either one, but yours may be the more usable, like for like direct moves or the minutia or something that was like a smaller move, it'd probably be better viewed on Brent. But again, I'm looking for a big move, so I don't think it matters which one you're watching. All right. Honest Aim, good to see you. Maybe we'll see you next week. They say, Mr. Legacy and the Tea Lady. Tonight, we are celebrating the Tea Lady and all she does to support you. What are you building? What you are building, us in the Beyond Work Mastermind, and the million plus people you touch. Trump to Davos, your thoughts? Thank you for the kind words and all the support. And again, really appreciate you guys. And I know my wife does too. So we are not going to Davos this year, but we do plan to go to Davos in 2027. And I had some people ask me, like, why would you even go to that? Why would you go to the World Economic Forum? My whole purpose of this is to get a seat at the table. Like, cool, make a bunch of money, and I want to help and impact a lot of lives, help a lot of people, impact a lot of lives. But in order to do that, you need capital, you need resources, you need network, you need a clout, you need access, right? Like I just talked about, being in rooms with the right people. And I might not even like those other people, but I will know what's going on, and I will be able to do what I can to fix it and make it right. Like, that's the whole MO. I want to have a seat at the table, know what's going on, and try to figure out a way where I can make sure that the average person, their standard of living comes up and people are being looked out for. And in a lot of ways, I don't think that's been happening the last 5 and 6 years. I think some of the people at the table maybe be taking advantage of people, and I don't like that. So I want to be there to be able to stop that. And that comes with a lot of things. I mean, we've talked about the Titanic before, but I'll mention that here. If you guys didn't know, the Titanic looked like its sister ship called the Olympic. The Olympic was owned by JP Morgan, and so was the Titanic in the early 1900s. They were the first, large cruise ships of their kind, the unsinkable ship. The Olympic was hit by a U.S. submarine, or maybe it was another U.S. ship. Anyway, military U.S. naval vessel struck the Olympic in the same spot that the Titanic hit the iceberg, by the way. And the insurance wouldn't pay out on the Olympic because the U.S. government said that it was the Olympic's fault. Anyway, the most prevalent insurance fraud ever has been through ships, because it's so easy. This person says the Olympia, so not the Olympic, the Olympia and the Titanic. If you look at those two boats in the harbor next to one another, you can't tell a difference. Like, there's photos of it, and they could very easily just swap the names on those two boats. The insurance did pay out on the Titanic, by the way. And it just so happened that JP Morgan was supposed to be, they say they're wrong. It is the Olympic. See, I knew I was right. Every once in a while, I get stuff right. It is the Olympic and the Titanic. So anyway, I believe that what happened with the Titanic was JP Morgan's way to be able to get the insurance that didn't get paid out from the first deal when they hit the U.S. naval vessel. And my whole point with this, and where I'm going to land the plane here, the three families that opposed the Federal Reserve were all aboard the Titanic when it sank. Jacob Astor and the other two families that were in complete opposition to the U.S. having a central bank just happened to be on that ship and died. The next year, guess what happened? The Federal Reserve was formed. And JP Morgan and everybody else that, the 6 banks that are the owners of the Federal Reserve have enriched themselves and benefited a lot from that transaction. And had those other families been around, that wouldn't have happened. I want to be one of those people. I want to be at the table and make sure that I have enough say-so that I can influence things, and things that aren't in the best interest of people don't happen. So that's why I want to go to Davos, because I want to know what's going on. So anyway, long tangent from what was mentioned there, but again, appreciate the super chat and you guys watching, and hopefully, again, I don't know if tinfoil hat. I have some tinfoil hat stuff. I think a lot of history that we were taught in school glosses over a lot of facts and context that might be. I always look at the why. Like, why would this person do that? What is their interest? What is their motive in doing these things? Is it just an accident, or was there something grander here that was conspiracy? Things that make you go, David says, Jake, do you think Ripple will be acquired? We talked about that a little bit earlier. Did you say DWP was doing an audit to quiet the naysayers? Not to quiet, it's literally required by our compliance. Like, we have to do an audit every single year. It's not to quiet the naysayers. Like, you do your annual audit at the end of the year. And we have Witham, which is our auditor, doing the audit on the hedge fund right now. Like, I don't think people understand the amount of cost that goes into compliance. It costs us $1 million a year to run this hedge fund. Now, it manages about $400 million worth of XRP, but it's not cheap. And we are working with the highest level, most credentialed fund admin, the attorneys, the auditor, the tax prep. All of it is the highest standard for compliance and regulation. And we take it very seriously. And so when people say, oh, well, you haven't done this or that, we're literally required to. It's not to shut anybody up or quiet the naysayers. Like, we were going to do this anyway, because it's an annual audit, and we will be audited by the SEC, because they are the regulator that we report to alongside FinCEN. Anyway, sorry. He says, you and Max and the team have done an amazing job. Thank you. I appreciate that. On the acquisition, I kind of gave you my percentages a little bit earlier. And yeah, DWP is going through the audit for the hedge fund and the other stuff here at the beginning of 2026. We got GTQ. They say, only today matters. Oh, very cool. Say, blessings. Please explain, why would Basel, IMF, BIS, World Bank allow XRP to take over the financial system they control? So if you want to take it back to Bretton Woods in 1944, when they decided to use the US dollar, the US had the most gold reserves at that point, and we were the largest creditor nation. We're down to today is the largest debtor nation, right? We have $38 trillion in debt. Now, if you look at percentage to GDP, we're still not as bad as Japan or the UK or some of these other countries. All that being said, back in 1944, John Maynard Keynes proposed the Bancor coin, which would be a basket of currencies that was weighted based on the GDP of different nations, that would sit as the liquidity mechanism, or basically the lender of last resort. When people needed money, they would go to the IMF and they would get Bancor. Today, that's been converted to the SDR, or the special drawing right, and they are going to move things on the blockchain and use the eSDR, or the electronic SDR, which is, again, got 6 different currencies. It's weighted based on the GDP of those nations. Maybe 7. I think it's 6, though. I think there's 6 currencies in the SDR. XRP will not be the SDR, but they need some way to be able to facilitate value transfer globally, real time, without them having to trust one another. And this is really the only agreed upon system that all of those parties have looked at, vetted, done due diligence on, used, trialed, and got to market with, that they feel comfortable using, that accomplishes all of the goals that they would like to have in order for the IMF to sit as the lender of last resort, in my opinion. So that's my thesis as to why, all of this is culminating to the use of the XRPL and XRP. You could also look at the IMF. They wrote a white paper in 2014 where they referenced the exchange rate peg, or their acronym XRP. Very shortly after that white paper was released, Ripple rebranded Ripples, which is what XRP had been rebranded from XNS when OpenCoin had it. They rebranded again to XRP in 2014, and it's been XRP ever since, after the IMF released that white paper referencing XRP as the exchange rate peg. We've seen Ripple meet with all of those bodies that you just mentioned. They've spoken on multiple panels with all those different people at those organizations. And it's a net benefit for them to move into this new system where there is no central bank or no single global reserve currency. There'll be a basket of commodities and XRP that sits as the global reserve digital asset or bridge currency. But everybody will be able to issue their own sovereign currency backed by whatever commodities they have in whatever ratio makes the most sense. Gold will be pegged to oil. I think XRP may also be used as backing for treasury bonds because it'll be backed by the global GDP. It'll be backed by back-end settlement for the stock market and FX and commodities, and every other application for large value transfer globally will be running over that network. So it'll be the most stable, reliable thing there is, as long as the world keeps moving. And we have internet, and we will have both those things because we got Starlink now. And that's the other piece. Like, none of this was really possible until we had global coverage for Starlink. Now, Ripple can send payments while it's offline and reconcile back to the ledger later. But you could, and maybe they've solved for the double spend even in that situation. Maybe it escrows or locks if you're offline, and then only comes back up, based on whatever the transactions were in that time frame. All that being said, it is uniquely positioned for all of those counterparties that you mentioned to, again, accomplish all of their objectives and be adopted at scale here globally. And I think the not too distant future. Beta AG I3G says, how long do you think it will take after the crash for XRP to emerge repriced? I think it will happen while everything is crashing. I could be wrong about that. There could absolutely be a falling knife scenario where XRP drops way low alongside everything else and then gets repriced or moves substantially higher. In that way, yeah, I think the supply shock is going to push it to 50 or $100 in a very short period of time. I think many people will sell there, and then I think there'll be a repricing on the other side of the Clarity Act and some other stuff. So when I say XRP's price appreciation will happen before the Clarity Act, I'm talking high 2 digits, low 3 digits is kind of my expectation. And again, that's what I thought things would do at the end of last year. And then I think that it'll be there for a little bit. And then I think maybe Tether implodes after because there's going to be reverb effects, right? Like the reverse carry trade is going to unwind, which will destabilize Bitcoin and gold. These are all dominoes that fall. How quickly do they fall depends on how close in proximity they are to one another and how much they affect one another. So all of them will fall and all of that will happen, and it will culminate to what I think of, a 4-digit XRP at the end of it. The volatility for XRP in the middle there, I don't know what that's going to look like. And I'm not going to be playing with it. I'm just going to be sitting on my hands until XRP is 4 digits plus. More XRP says, if no oil spike and no BlackRock ETF, do you believe XRP can hit $100 to $1,000 in 2026? No. If those two things do not happen for the bingo card, I don't believe that it can happen. Crypto, not crypto Karen, haha, crypto Karina. Golly, I need more tea. I can't even talk. They say, thank you for the super chat, by the way. They say, hey, Jake, thanks for all that you do. You mentioned that Elon was going to speak about XRP soon. Any chance this is related to the impending X payment? Wink, wink. I do think that he will talk about XRP in the not too distant future. The reason I say that is, again, stuff I've shared in the mastermind maybe once publicly. I have a good friend that knows Elon, and has, talked to him for a long period of time. About 4 years ago, he told her at dinner to buy XRP and Doge. It may have been longer than that. I think she said it was 2019. 2019, he said buy XRP and Doge. So if that tells you anything, if Elon knew back then what Doge would do and what XRP has done and is going to do, yeah, pretty confident that it's probably involved in some capacity with X payments. I think that X will issue a stablecoin for the back end settlement of their stuff internationally. And they'll probably do tokenized deposits for their user base. Elon wants to develop the X app, right, where it's the everything app. And for them to do that, their original mission was value transfer through X payments, which merged with PayPal back in the day. And him and Peter Thiel and the whole PayPal mafia, crushed it. And then they've all gone on to do prolific things since then. So all that being said, I do think that there's some component of it that is through XRP, but I think XRP is more tied to Starlink than it is Twitter. Lori says, hi from Wyoming. Hey, very cool. Are you going to lose the ability to earn yield on XRP? I was hoping to use it to pay my AUM fees. I know you're working on it now, but I'm afraid they won't allow it. Oh, we're going to allow it. They will. Believe me, the counterparty that we're working with wants it just as bad as we do. It's just got to be structured the right way legally. So just, kind of at a high level, going through things, the other counterparty was concerned that there might be a securities violation. And again, like, we have attorneys that go through things at scale. We do things a very specific way in order to meet laws and regulations and compliance, so that we don't skirt things, but things are structured the right way so that all parties feel very comfortable working together. That's taken time. And it's not always our partner's highest priority. So, there are delays that have happened, but it is going to happen. I can assure you of that. And there are other people aside from us that want it and also want to work with them. AIM Serve says, hey, any updates on the amendments being passed? And if they do/did, what does that mean? So a lot of the fixes actually did go through today. So there's a 2-week waiting period now before those fixes are implemented on the network and they're adopted and pushed. And then at that point, I think that they can start doing, some of the other stuff that has been outstanding, permissioned dexes and permissioned domains, which are 2 big things for institutional adoption of the XRPL. I think that all of that should happen. These should go through in the next 2 weeks. So we'll call it 128 when those get passed. And then I think shortly after that, the other ones will meet their vote requirements, which is 80% plus 1, or about 28 validators that are voting yes. Then there'll be another 2-week period before those are implemented. But on the other side of that, outside of any more fixes that need to be pushed for the network, I think that they'll probably move on to voting on XLS 64, 65, and 66, which are the most exciting amendments that I've ever seen personally. Those are the ones that I'm most excited for here in 2026. So excited that we're moving forward, excited that we are going to see those fixes pushed likely in the next 2 weeks, and likely by the end of February, the XRPL is going to be ready for institutional adoption on the mainnet. So I don't know if that tells you anything, but and there are permissioned ecosystems that can already utilize XRP to settle, and they already have all the smart contract capability for AML, KYC, all the stuff. But if you did want, mass institutional adoption by a lot of counterparties utilizing the same network and infrastructure, you need zero knowledge proof, you need permission domains, you need permission dexes. I think the other reason that Brad probably wasn't as upset as Brian from Armstrong is that the XRPL could be used irrespective of how the Clarity Act is drafted. It can be curated to any of those things because they haven't, like, they have the digital identity, they have credentials, they have KYC, AML, KYB on chain, but they haven't gone through like oversight and a lot of the stuff that's going to be required for how the regulations drafted, and they can draft the amendments to meet those things on chain. So the XRPL sits at the forefront of adoption for that. And again, Ripple can only propose amendments. It has to be all of the validators. They run 3 of those that are the validators that everybody else knows who they are and vote for the amendments. There's lots of nodes on the XRPL, but the UNL validators are the ones that pass the amendments. So anyway, they've got to convince all the other people, and they've got to do their tests and all that stuff before they're going to pass it too. I like the governance on the XRPL. I think it's very well thought through. Razorback must be from Arkansas. They say, is there a way to fund lifestyle prior to 59 and a half years old with XRP and an IRA with DWP, or we just need to plan on paying penalties for early withdrawal? Most of our clients have a portion outside of their IRA. They have personal investments or investments through their LLC or their trust. They use the IRA for the purpose that you just mentioned there, for their retirement later on in life, in order to be able to take the distributions either tax-free if it's a Roth, or penalty-free if it's a traditional IRA. Prior to that, you can't borrow against the initial principal. We do have an algorithmic trading strategy that we're going to be launching here in February for our clients at Digital Wealth Partners. We announced that with Tillman and Arch Public a few weeks ago. And you have a proprietary strategy that nobody else has to be able to generate returns on your XRP inside of your IRA at Digital Wealth Partners. The additional returns that are generated could be put into a side pocket or a side account. And then you could borrow against that. We've got to work through that with our attorneys in order to make sure that that is legally compliant. But that could be one way that you could fund your lifestyle with the returns off of the XRP inside that account. You can't borrow against the principal. You can't leverage it because it's a qualified account, and there's a lot of rules around that. So, if you did want full ability to use it in any capacity that you want to, pulling it out, and again, I'm not advocating for this or telling you to do anything. I can't give you financial advice. I did this, and I'm sharing what I did. I pulled my money out of my IRA in kind, my XRP, back in 22. So, I paid the penalties and the taxes to do that. But XRP was like 36 cents when I did it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll eat it while the price is low. And then that way I have full usability of this. Because the other thing is they wouldn't allow me to do, and this was Bitcoin IRA. It's not iTrust, which is another competitor. They wouldn't allow me to stake my flare inside of my retirement account. I was like, so you guys aren't going to have any DeFi or yield bearing, like I'm just going to hold it. And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, this sucks. So I'm taking it out. So again, you do you. I don't know how old you are. If you're already in your 50s, you probably just want to let it hang out. At least that's how I think about things. I think our advisors would probably, they're also probably not going to tell you to take it out, but they're going to tell you the pros and cons and then help you make the best decision for you and your family. All right, we'll take one more super chat and then we're going to wrap it up tonight. Wayne, oh, it's a good one to end on. Good to see you, my dude. Do you worry about the top 100 wallets owning 70% of all XRP? Seems like a dangerous amount of ownership by a small amount of people. No. The people that own that are institutions, enterprises, and the initial founders of Ripple. And they want it to be they need it to be successful. If it's not successful, they're not going to be able to offset their debt. And the entire financial system is going to collapse. And you would think it would be difficult to orchestrate, all of these people cooperating. But if you brought them all a solution and said, hey, if y'all don't mess this up, we all get out of jail free. Okay. I know, like, y'all know that this is burning. This is the only way out of it. We figured it out. BlackRock and, other people are backing it, and the Fed and, the IMF and all these people. Like, this is what they chose. Okay. And we're going to give you a pre-allocated amount, and you got to sit on it until the problem plays out, and then you'll be good. You cool with that? Not going to sell it? Nope. And they can't, because it's that's the other thing with the pre-allocated contracts. Like, you could pre-portion these out into wallets that aren't even in control by whatever the person has, that is, the contracts with. They have an option to purchase it at a later date. Just like Greg Kidd. Greg Kidd talked about, he had $1 billion option on XRP at 0.03 of a penny. I don't think he's exercised that, and maybe he forewent it. But a lot of these large financial institutions, or those wallets that you're discussing, I think are that type of situation. And post price appreciation, they'll be able to buy it for pennies on the dollar, or pennies on the thousands of dollars, and be able to then, offset their debt. All right. I think that's going to be it for tonight. I definitely did not get through all the super chats. And again, I appreciate people hanging out and asking good questions. If we missed them, then again, I would highly recommend that you send them over to our team via DM, and they will get them to me, and I will read them on the next one. We'll be back next Monday. I'm traveling this weekend, but I will be back Monday to do the live, just as we normally schedule. Again, we would love to have you in the mastermind if that's something you're interested in. Talk about a lot more than what we share here, and we have a lot of value there in the community. If you want to try that out, see if it's for you, see if the Discord works good, which it doesn't for some people. If it doesn't, you cancel at any time. It's month to month, no commitment or contract. It's $25 for social. If you use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO gets you the first month for like $5 off, so like $20 instead of $25. And then we are doing away with social memberships after this month. So, February and on, it'll be a carbon 1 or higher, which is $100 a month. So if you do want to try it and get the value and pay less, this is kind of the last time to do that. And then aside from that, if you need the LLC, we talked about that a lot tonight. You can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF50 OFFDAGLLC. That's 50 OFFDAGLLC. Get you everything end to end for the holding company there in Wyoming to manage digital assets in the best way possible. We've done over 7,000 LLCs for people, structured them the right way, help them maintain their corporate veil, creditor protection, and anonymity. And then if you do need a living trust, it's an additional $500, which will be a little more expensive in the near future when we add the assignment to that. I think we're doing $2,800 for the LLC, the trust, and the assignment of the assets from the LLC to the trust, so that you get the creditor protection and the probate protection. And then last but not least, if you want to work with Digital Wealth Partners, we are taking international clients individually at this point. Nothing here domestic in the US. If you are domestic, you do still have to have a trust or an LLC. But for those Canadian clients or people in the UK that are having a hard time setting things up, if you have at least 50,000 XRP, that is our minimum at Digital Wealth Partners, and they can start to get you onboarded over there. All you got to do is go to digitalwealthpartners.net. Make sure you go to .net. All right. And I think that's going to be it. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Monday to come hang out with me and ask fantastic questions. I hope you have a wonderful week. God bless, and we'll see you on the next one.